Shields up, Ironbreakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video. Welcome back to Monster Hunter Rise, and today we actually saw a couple of interviews go live with some new information about the game, so I'm going to be going over a couple of these interviews and tell you guys my opinions on some of the things that are discussed. As you guys can probably tell, I'm still a little bit under the weather, so forgive me if I say something wrong or read something wrong, but I am under medication, so that's my excuse. Anyway, let's get started. We're going to be starting with the IGN interview, and on the title they put up, Monster Hunter Rise's skippable cutscenes and 8 new details. So we're going to be able to skip cutscenes. That's definitely going to be one of the new things. Anyway, the new normal naming convention. This is more of a big picture detail, but you should know Monster Hunter games with subheads like World and Rise are the new norm. So basically they're going to be getting rid of numbers, which kind of makes sense. I mean, when people see a big number at the end of a game, sometimes it can be a little bit of a turnoff. Like, I know several friends, at least, that whenever they hear the number of the next Final Fantasy game, for instance, they're a little bit turned off by it. They're like, Final Fantasy 16? Does that mean I have to play 15 games before to know the story of the 16th? And obviously that's not the case. Anybody who knows anything about Final Fantasy knows that's not the case. But, you know, in Monster Hunter, I guess some people could feel like that as well. I mean, Monster Hunter World would have been Monster Hunter 5. And then the next one will be Monster Hunter 6 or whatever. And then there's the offshoots. It was getting a little bit confusing. So them going with subheads kind of makes a little bit of sense. Sujimoto said each new game is based around a specific theme or concept, and they decided that it would be better to give new Monster Hunters a title that reflects their focus. For example, World's introduction of large open areas and Rise's emphasis on verticality. Specifically, I asked if Rise and World were examples of a new normal naming convention and if we were done with numbered Monster Hunters. Sujimoto responded with, yeah, each new game is based around a specific theme or concept, and we decided that it would be better for the players to understand what the game is about. If we give the game a title that reflects what it's about rather than just a number, so yes, we will be doing this in the future as well. So I guess that's it for numbered Monster Hunter entries, I guess. Rise is very much its own unique thing. Though it has shared similarities with Monster Hunter World, Sujimoto and Ichinose insisted it's very much its own unique thing and not just a carbon copy of World, which I guess because of the movesets and a lot of the weapons, some people could tell, oh, this is just kind of like almost like a port even, because, you know, the weapons do have more similar movesets to World than necessarily the older games, right? And you also have a lot of the quality of life stuff in World, like being able to move while drinking potions. We saw that in the gameplay, and also having mounts and stuff like that. Ichinose was the director for Monster Hunter Generations and had been wanting to make a new portable Monster Hunter, which he began working on largely in tandem with Monster Hunter World. This game became what we now know as Monster Hunter Rise. If you try out the game, I'm sure you'll notice that it is very much its own unique thing, Ichinose said. We have some of the same quality of life improvements as Monster Hunter World, but it is very much focused on the Switch as a platform. And yes, I do believe that we're going to be seeing quite a bit of differences from World. It's not just the Wirebug, guys. Trust me, I'm pretty sure that's going to be different. Rise is going to have its own unique new things as well, some of which we're not allowed to talk about yet. Of course, the game has just recently been announced. They already showed some gameplay. They're not going to give us a lot of details because some things will have to wait for a while. As for whether Rise feels more like World or a more classic Monster Hunter like Generations, Ichinose said there are elements from Generations and from World, but Rise is going to have its own unique new things as well, some of which we're not allowed to talk about yet, so there's a lot to look forward to. Ichinose also said that Rise will certainly feel like a Monster Hunter, and every game in the series has to meet those standards as to not alienate fans. With that in mind, any experience from any past game, whether it's World, Generations, or an older Monster Hunter game, will prepare you for a new game in the series. This was actually, it's an interesting thing to bring up in this interview, because I remember when I saw the first footage, like if you guys go and watch my reaction video that I did when I saw the very first footage in that Nintendo Direct, I was just like, oh, but this is not regular Monster Hunter. This is like an action adventure type game. Initially, when I saw the footage, I thought it was something completely different, but no, it was still a Monster Hunter game, and I can see that probably other people might have seen the trailer and they could have come out of it with the same notion that I had. Single player and multiplayer quests are separated. If you've only played Monster Hunter World, you'll be used to the idea that all key quests can be completed either solo or with friends, but in previous Monster Hunters, there was a separation between the two playstyles, with single-player quests accepted in the village hub and multiplayer quests accepted in a gathering hub-like location. This more traditional method of quest separation returns in Monster Hunter Rise, but don't worry, single-player progression won't affect your ability to progress in multiplayer quests and vice versa. However, past Monster Hunters did require players to progress the single-player campaign in order to unlock certain features and facilities, and we don't know if this is the case for Rise just yet. And this is actually a significant step back for me personally because, I've played both games, and back in the older games, you'd go through the village quests, and then you would go through the hub quests, and sometimes you'd unlock some of the stuff in the village quests in order to unlock some of the stuff in the hub quests, and then you would do some of the hub quests, and then you would be able to go back to the village and do some of the other village quests. And I always thought that the way in which those quests unlocked was extremely confusing. As a matter of fact, if you've watched my streams of Generations Ultimate, there were several times when I would be asking Kegren, what is this quest? And Kegren would be like, well, where did you do this other quest? And I'd be like, well, what about this other quest? And some of us would have them, some of us would not. And it turns out that we would have to go back and do some other village quest, and then unlock some other quest in the hub, to then unlock another village quest. And I was never really a big fan of that. I really liked the way that they unified everything in World, and you just be able to hey, here's all of the quests, and you can take them, you can pick them up on the Gathering Hub, or you can pick them up in the village. I kind of prefer that way, but I'm willing to give it a chance and see what they do, see what the separation is going to be like. They also say that you don't necessarily need to progress in the village in order to play multiplayer, so I'm assuming also vice versa. We'll see, but it's Monster Hunter. At the end of the day, I'm going to be playing it regardless. This is kind of like a speed bump for me, but it is something, it is one of the features that I didn't want it to see go back to its old ways, but maybe they'll come up with something interesting and we'll see what it's about. I also think that a big deal about this is because of the fact that you are going to be playing handheld, so they're like, well, you're not always going to have access to an online hub, so we want to make sure that you can play it single player. But I'm like, well, yeah, but you could just set up a hub when you're doing multiplayer, and then don't set up a hub when you're doing single player, and the same quests would still be there. There's also some notes on scaling in regards to multiplayer quests. I'm not sure if that's in this interview or in the other one, but we're going to be going over 2 interviews, so relax. We'll talk about scaling as well. Monster Hunter Rise's cutscenes can be skipped. In Monster Hunter Rise, cutscenes are skippable in both multiplayer and single player. This means that they will no longer create a barrier to joining multiplayer quests like they did in World. I actually don't think they needed to create a barrier, because it's not because of the cutscenes being skippable or unskippable that there was a barrier there. The barrier was the fact that you simply would not allow players to join in before the cutscene played out. And I actually talked about this extensively, and I think a better solution would be to simply either include the hunters in the cutscene, or don't even include the hunters in the cutscene and just have each player see their own hunter as the protagonist for the cutscene, but allow them to queue in together. I'm sure that nobody really cares that much where it's like, oh, but I only saw one hunter, now there's 3 others here. I'm pretty sure most players don't really care that much about that. So I don't think that them being skippable or not was that big of a deal. The big deal was the fact that you would not allow players to join in before the cutscenes played out. But anyway, they say we made sure not to put too many restrictions on that, so you can play with anyone you want. The only restrictions that are in place are your hunter rank. Thankfully, you will always be able to rewatch these cutscenes at your leisure, even if you do choose to skip them initially, which is also good. I really wish more games would do this. I see this mostly in Japanese games. Not a lot of Western games do this, that they let you rewatch cutscenes, and I really think it's a big deal. Because a lot of times maybe you'll want to watch a cutscene again to soak in some more detail, or just remember something that happened, and it's very useful to be able to replay cutscenes, and that's something that the West could really learn from some of these developers. No, Monster Hunter Rise is not inspired by Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Okay, so they asked them, obviously, I'm not even sure if I want to read this one, but obviously they asked them if the game is inspired by Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Let me tell you something, okay? Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild did not invent climbing, all right? Plenty of other games did climbing before Legend of Zelda. I realize that, with its open world and all of the stuff that you can do in Zelda, it's easy to see that something like that could be inspired, but it sometimes it does get on my nerves, because it's like, look, we have Shadow of the Colossus, who kind of like did climbing on monsters. We have Dragon's Dogma, who also did climbing on monsters before Legend of Zelda came out. And we have other games that have done climbing in multiple different ways. It's not like Legend of Zelda invented climbing things. So, yeah. Anyway, they say just moving around alone is going to be a lot more fun in the game. Monster Hunter games already had a lot of exploration elements to them, and we basically wanted to build on that. We wanted to give the player even more freedom to move around. Just moving around alone is going to be a lot more fun in this game. As for how this freedom of movement affects combat, I was told it doesn't mean you have to use the Wirebug during battle, but monsters' attacks have different variations, and depending on where the hunter is, there are monsters that will change their attack methods. This was also addressed in the interview that Eric's did, and I just watched that, where Eric's was asking, well, what about if a hunter like sets himself up in a sniping position and just shoots monsters from where they can't reach you? Because with the Wirebug, you can reach all of these crazy places, right? And they say that they have control over the map design, so they can kind of decide where the engagements are going to be happening, and they're going to make things happen in a way where you're not going to be able to do that kind of stuff and cheese a monster out, or they will adapt the monster to be able to counterattack you doing something cheap like that. So they're going to be manipulating the monster AI and the map design to try and avoid those situations as much as possible. So don't expect to be able to cheese monsters too badly by taking advantage of being able to traverse walls, as they say here. We hope players enjoy having the freedom to do various actions by using the Wirebug. All about the Wirebug and more surprises to come. In both the trailers and TGS gameplay, we've been able to see quite a few flashy new attacks made possible by consuming the Wirebug gauge. These attacks remind me of Generation's Hunter Arts. However, Ichinozi explained that while Hunter Arts were mostly used as a sort of special moment, could only be used occasionally because of long cooldowns, the Wirebug attacks are something they actively want players to use during combat in between attacks to make new combos. So anyone thinking that this is going to be completely optional, if you want to go for an optimal playstyle, probably not going to be the case. Also, unlike Hunter Arts, these Wirebug attacks are not customizable. However, here comes the exciting part, there are other new elements regarding actions that they can't talk about yet. They said to please look forward to that. Isn't that the most traditionally Japanese thing to say? Please look forward to it. And as a bonus detail about combat, they told me there would be no armor skills that augment the Wirebug abilities. This was something that I was curious about, because you could probably do some really overpowered stuff if you're able to increase the charges of Wirebug, or if you were able to, like, you know, reduce the cooldown on Wirebug. So I'm glad that they're kind of like limiting that, because if you expand too much on the Wirebug, I could see that thing being completely broken. Icons are being adapted to suit the Nintendo Switch's small screen. I must admit I didn't actually notice this myself, but I did see plenty of buzz around it online. And like me, the director and producer were surprised that so many people were talking about it. The change in the antidote icon. Previous Monster Hunter games, the antidote icon looked exactly like a potion, except it was blue. However, in Monster Hunter Rise, it has a totally different shape. This is because they are adapting some of the icons to be more legible on the smaller screen of the Switch. As a result, they've been looking over existing icons and fixing them to suit the Switch as necessary, like bowgun ammo as well. Nintendo don't voice chat. Speaking of adapting for the Nintendo Switch, and unfortunately moving on to the not so hype part of this list, there will be no voice chat on the Nintendo Switch or on the Switch mobile app. This is pretty much the norm when it comes to Nintendo Switch games. However, it can't help but be a bit disappointed when I asked to elaborate as to why. They said they cannot comment on Nintendo Switch hardware features. I'm pretty sure that it's probably because they're using all of the resources in the hardware, and if they were to put voice chat, it would probably lag the game, because, you know, the Nintendo is not the most powerful of consoles. So if you really want to expand on it and get voice chat and whatnot, that's one of the reasons why they did the whole weird thing with phones and whatnot. But to be quite frank, whenever I'm playing with friends, most likely I'm going to be either on Discord or actually present next to them, so I'm not overly concerned, even though it is a bit of a disappointment, you know, for people that maybe just it would be convenient for them to be able to voice chat over the Switch, and I'm sorry, but, you know, it is what it is. Prowler mode is not returning. Finally, one final bit of mildly disappointing news we learned is that the Prowler mode, which lets you play as a feline in Generations, will not be returning in Monster Hunter Rise. But hey, at least you can play with your adorable Palicos and Palamutes by your side instead, which you can, like, you know, play. I'm not sure if you can play catch, but you can, like, grab their paw and stuff like that. There's interactions that you can do with them, which is pretty cool. Of course, we also learned a ton more during gameplay videos. Okay, yeah, we already did the analysis of the gameplay videos and all of that jazz. This was the IGN article by Casse de Freitas. Moving right along to this Reno Gazette Journal article where Jason Hidalgo spoke to the developers, and he did a bit of a Q&A, devs talk separate campaign, gear designs, and more. And let's get to the questions of this particular interview. How did you come up with the idea for the Wirebug? The last game I worked on was Monster Hunter Generations, and after that, I felt like I've pretty much done what I could with the action as far as the classic series was concerned. So with Monster Hunter Rise, I wanted to add something completely new. Since the game was going to have seamless maps, I wanted to have something else that was more fun when it came to moving around, and that's where the idea for the Wirebug came about. Monster Hunter World already had a strong exploratory element, and I wanted to expand on that further by allowing you to go wherever you want with the Wirebug. You can use it to climb up walls and reach places you normally can't get to in order to find all sorts of hidden areas. By the way, this game was in development at the same time as Monster Hunter World. So Wirebug is not just like, oh, you guys did the Clutch Claw, we're doing the Wirebug. By the time they were coming up with the concept of the Wirebug, the Clutch Claw probably didn't even exist. As a matter of fact, if anything, it could have potentially been the other way around. The Clutch Claw might have even been inspired by the Wirebug, because again, these two games were being developed in parallel, essentially, right? In addition, for using it for movement, I also wanted to integrate it into the moveset for hunters, which allows them to perform new actions. Speaking of actions, do Wirebug arts work like the old hunter arts? Do you have to select them from a list, or are all the moves for a specific weapon accessible at any time? You can use the available Wirebug arts for a weapon anytime. Naturally, there are the cooldowns though, which you guys will have noticed if you've seen the gameplay. We've seen that there's like a little cooldown every time that you use a Wirebug action. Can you talk about the idea behind the Palamute dog partners came about, and are you considering Palamute skin options like Amaterasu from Okami or Wolflink from Legend of Zelda? We've always received a lot of fan feedback for some kind of dog companion. Since we've only had Palicos in the past, a lot of people wanted to be able to go hunt with dogs, which is something they are now able to do with Monster Hunter Rise. My question is, once again, Capcom, where is Cha-Cha and Kayamba? Where are they? It's all about the Palicos and the Palamutes. What about my Cha-Cha and Kayamba? Come on, man. As far as skins and crossovers, we have some skins layered and layered armor for Palamutes, but we don't have any collaborations planned yet for something like Amaterasu or Wolflink. The development team is still hard at work finishing the game. That's something we'll be looking into in the future. Will weapons and armor designs for existing monsters be based on classic Monster Hunter or World? For monsters returning from Monster Hunter World, we will use the armor from World. Interesting, because those are the updated models, essentially. For monsters that were in older titles, we will use the older armor and polish them up a bit so they look nicer. So expect the same treatment that we've seen in Monster Hunter World. You know, they kind of like remade all of the armors, right? And for monsters that appeared in both the old games and World, we will use the newest designs from World. However, since Monster Hunter World also had the slinger as part of the armor, some changes needed to be made, obviously, because there is no slinger. And this is something that I had suspected. I don't think it had been, it might have been officially confirmed. Like, I remember mentioning it whenever we were doing our live streams. I was like, oh, look, they don't have a slinger. But looks like there's going to be no slinger whatsoever. And it makes sense because it's like they don't want the players to be focusing on aiming, you know, the Wirebug, and then at the same time aiming the slinger. They're like, no, you aim one thing. You aim the Wirebug, focus on that. There's not going to be any slingers. So also there's not going to be any flint shots or anything remotely similar to the Clutch Claw or anything like that. We're going quite a bit more old school, which is cool for me because, like, the Clutch Claw, like I said, it's something that is fun, but I want to see the next thing. I want to see the next idea, and that's something that they always try to do. Like Monster Hunter 4 introduced mounting. Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate did hunter arts. The World introduced the Clutch Claw and the Slinger. They're always coming up with new ideas, and that is cool because it keeps things fresh. Are we getting any other weapons besides the existing 14, like Prowler cats are a completely new weapon? Monster Hunter Rise will have the same 14 weapons as past titles, but you'll be able to use the Wirebug for making new actions. So there's a lot of new cool stuff that you can do. As far as hunting as a Palico, there will be no Prowler mode this time. We had already confirmed that from the previous interview, but also no new weapons. I spoke and I said that I felt like there weren't going to be any new weapons. because usually whenever you get new weapons is in a new generation of Monster Hunter. And right now we're still in the 5th generation. Both World and Rise, I think, are considered 5th generation Monster Hunters. So any chance for a new weapon would have been in the 6th generation Monster Hunter. The last 2 weapons that were added into the Monster Hunter franchise, for those of you that want to know, was the Insect Glaive and the Charge Blade, and those were added in Monster Hunter 4. So that was the last time that we saw new weapons being added into the game. And it kind of makes sense, because like with the 5th generation, we saw a big expansion to the movesets of the weapons. So yeah. Will there be an option for layered weapons and armor? Yes. How does multiplayer work in this game? Will you be able to play both story quests and non-story quests like World? It'll be a bit different from World. Monster Hunter Rise uses a more classic style of gameplay where quests are separated into single-player village quests and multiplayer gathering hub quests. The gathering hub quests will also have cutscenes, but you can skip them anytime you want. You will also not be required to reach a certain progression in the story in order to play quests together at the gathering hub. What is the player scaling like for hunts? Will monster health or HP change depending on the number of players? Yes, Monster Hunter Rise will have scaling based on the number of players. Now my question is, does that mean that you will have single player scaling on the Gathering Hub quests? Because that was definitely not the case for Generations Ultimate. It will always be scaled for multiplayer, which would make quests significantly more challenging because naturally they were intended to be tackled with more players. And due to the fact that the game does have the separation between the Gathering Hub and the village quests, it would make sense that it would scale similarly to World, but always for at least 2 players. I'm not sure if that is the case or not, because at the end of the day, if you're just able to go to the Gathering Hub and then tackle quests that are scaled for 1 player, it doesn't make a lot of sense that there's that separation there, right? So I think minimal monsters will most likely always be scaled for 2 players. I think that's what makes the most sense, given that they are separating the village from the Gathering Hub. But again, this is all speculation from my part. I don't really know. How will armor skills and decorations work in this game? Will it be more like World or more like classic Monster Hunter? That's something that we still can't talk about at this time. Interesting that they said that to the Reno Gazette Journal, but to Eric's, they said something very different. Now, for those of you that don't know, in the older games, basically the skills worked on a threshold system. So each armor piece would have like +3 or +2 to a certain skill. For instance, attack, +3 attack on legs, +2 attack on gloves, stuff like that. And you would have to reach a certain threshold in order to get benefits. So for instance, if you had +9 attack, you would actually get nothing. You would need to get to 10. And when you got to +10, then you would have like your first point in attack. And then the next threshold would be at like 15. And then the next one would be at 20. So you'd need to really stack up the numbers to make it work. And then the way that it worked is also you would have negative skills. So for instance, plus attack could have a negative crit eye or something along those lines, right? So you'd have to balance it out. Otherwise, you would end up with a negative skill. If you'd get a skill to -10, then that would have a negative impact on your armor. And that is the old way of doing things. In the new Monster Hunter, as we know, basically every piece of armor has like the set number of skills, and they just kind of like add skills for you. So what Ichinose told Eric's is that the new system was going to be a mixture of the old system with the new one. So most likely, I think we're going to see like a point type system, but potentially with negatives in the armor as well, so that you're not able to stack up like the ridiculous amount of skills you can stack in the game right now, particularly after the release of the Fatalis set, which is completely and utterly broken. But yeah, will the aim mechanic for ranged weapons be like World, and will there be support for motion-based aiming like with Zelda on the Switch? It's based on the system in World, but it's not 100% the same because we have to adapt it to the Switch platform, so it will have some unique elements. And yes, you can use motion controls for aiming as well. Personally, I love this. I know that there's a lot of people that don't like motion controls for aiming. Me, I friggin' love it, so give me more of that. Aiming with motion controls is just like a no-brainer for the Switch. And if people would just give it a chance, they would see a massive difference in accuracy when it comes to that kind of stuff. Will there be a rotating event schedule and regular updates just like World? For Monster Hunter World, we assume that most people will be playing online all the time, so we use that specific system for event quests. But this time, since Monster Hunter Rise will be on the Switch and not everyone will be online at all time, we are using the same classic system we did in Monster Hunter Double Cross Generations Ultimate, where you can download quests in advance. So basically, you download quests and they're in your console forever, and you can do those quests whenever you want, which is pretty cool. And in my opinion, I prefer it that way over the timed events, because a lot of times you might want to, do a quest and you're just like, oh, the quest is not in rotation. Like even recently, I was out of Great Spirit Vein Gems and I was like, oh, let's go beat up on Nergigante, except the Nergigante event quest wasn't there. Just like with World, it seems that hunters no longer do the flex motion or guts pose from the classic games when drinking potions. Yes, there are a lot of quality of life improvements from World that we are bringing into Monster Hunter Rise. We've heard a lot of fan feedback, so we're bringing in the stuff that people like and moving away from the things that players didn't like as much. I was not against the flex. Like, sure, the new system feels better, but if they went back to the flex, that would not be a big deal for me. And I actually think it's funny and kind of like... it's an old school thing. I wasn't against the flex. Are you guys against the flex? Let me know in the comments section. Sujimoto, one of the reasons we got rid of the flexing pose was because we wanted the game to play as smoothly as possible. The flex pose was something we only used back when the map was still split into different sections that loaded separately. Since we got rid of those separate sections and Rise is using seamless locales, we decided to get rid of the flex pose as well. How will the monster count compare to past titles? Will it be closer to something like Generations Ultimate or World? We get asked this question a lot, and we don't really have an answer to it because we aren't focused on the number of monsters when we create a game. For every game, we have a new concept or theme that we are working with. Then as we develop the game, we start looking at which monsters fit that theme and the new system, and which ones would be most fun to fight. And that's what we base the volume of monsters on. We don't really look at the actual number of monsters. Can you talk at all about the potential G rank or Master rank option for the game, and will Monster Hunter Rise feature special powered up versions of monsters, kind of like tempered monsters in World or Deviants in Generations? Please wait for future information on monster details. Will Monster Hunter Rise have the series' unique Monster Hunter language as an option? For Monster Hunter Rise, the Monster Hunter language voiceover will be included. There are 3 language options that you can choose from: Japanese, English, and Monster Hunter language. Looks like we're out of time. Thanks for... Okay, so that's the ending of the interview. So that's a lot of new information that we got from Monster Hunter Rise. I know that it was kind of like quickfire style. I also looked up some new Gaijin Hunter tweets, and it looks like most of the information was contained in these 2 interviews that we went over here. But I believe that Gaijin Hunter is going to be releasing a new video tomorrow, and if you haven't seen it yet, I'd advise you guys to check out the Eric's interview. I'll put a link to it in the pinned comment of this video. I might forget because I'm sick and medicated brain. If I do forget, remind me in the comment section, and I'll put it there. But thank you all very much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you did not enjoy this video, hit the dislike button. I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.